Hi, I'm Noga Arbel, and I'm the Israelite with Channel Tov News, bringing you unfiltered truth, news, and analysis from Israel. When Chamberlain and Churchill were heads of state, they had very different approaches to what winning is. Chamberlain wanted peace in our time. He was focused on the here and the now, and that's why they lost. Churchill promised the British people blood, sweat, and tears, but his goal wasn't in our time. His goal was the defense of liberty. And honestly, he was under enormous pressures at the time to surrender, because most of the British establishment didn't want to take Germany on. They didn't want the burdens of protecting liberties. And can you imagine living in a world where the British surrendered and the US never entered the Second World War? A world where the Nazis are still alive, breathing, kicking, and running the world? Do you want to live in a world like that? The reason why we have to win wars for liberty, the reason why we have to annihilate terror wherever it stands, is because we stand for liberty. Is because if you allow terror to prevail, and make no mistake, Roosevelt, at the time Churchill was calling for blood, sweat, and tears, was apologizing to the Nazi regime for criticism from his own people, from Americans, because he didn't want the war either. Nobody wants the war. The question is, can we afford to lose it? Israelis can't. We know for a fact that if the Arabs were to lay down their arms, there would be peace. And if Israel was to lay down its arms, there would be no Israel. So we have no choice, and we have to win. But unfortunately, there's a group, a very loud, rather cuckoo, I'm sorry to say, very small group of Israelis who don't get that, who are Chamberlain-like, who want the here and the now and the right now. And consequences be damned, it's someone else's problem. If Churchill had thought that way 80 years ago, Nazi Germany would have been a force to be reckoned with. And if we do not annihilate the Iranian forces that are now threatening liberty in the Western, the known world, we will be faced with that same reality, and a lot sooner than we think. Which is why I've asked Dr. Yair Ansbacher to join us today. Dr. Ansbacher is a national security expert and active duty special forces who took part in the rescue attempts on the 7th of October. And I want to discuss winning with him today, how you win a war and why it is crucial to do so. Dr. Ansbacher, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Okay. So,
by the way, the words that you used were like the big difference between peace and rest in peace, right? Something like that. I really like that.
Yeah, you can have peace in more than one way.
More than one way, yeah. Okay.
But if you fight for it, it's the kind that's worth having.
Yeah,
And so, but there seem to be a lot of Israelis and also a lot of people out there who either don't realize why it's important for us to fight or don't realize what winning looks like.
Right.
We thought we might do them, we might help them out and show them what winning looks like. And before that, I want to state very clearly, winning a war against an enemy like Iran, who is running the show here, Hamas, or the Nazis, is when your enemy is no more, when they're either gone or they surrender with no hope to ever reestablish. That is what happened with Nazi Germany. That is what happened with the Japanese in the Second World War. And that is the goal today. The people who shoot at rocket launchers and try to annihilate the tunnels and don't realize that the problem is the terrorists and the education they give the next generation are people who will lose the war. So we now have a map that Dr. Ansbacher has brought us. We're going to explain what winning this part of this particular round of the Israel-Islam war, so the Gaza wing of we want to see what would winning the Gaza part of the Israel-Islam war, or this round of it anyway, would look like. What is it that we're looking at?
Okay, so we are actually seeing a visual poll. This is an imagery taken out of a poll that we did in order to show the way that most of the Israelis are imagining or willing to see their winning, their definition of winning the war.
So let's break this in two. Let's first understand what the map does, or what is it that we're seeing, and what sort of security reality can we expect? And then we'll talk about whether the loud Israelis who don't understand what winning is are actually representing Israel.
Okay, beautiful. So you can see that, first of all, the right part of the map is, of course, north. We are looking at it upside down, but it's right. The blue part, the one that my image is actually just covering on, is the north part of the Gaza Strip. And at the moment, we know that the IDF is controlling about like more than 80% out of the north part of the Gaza Strip. The only thing that is different from what we're seeing in the map than the reality is a little bit more than 100,000 Gazan people that are still there. This map and this idea, this poll, is actually not only describing the way that most of the Israelis would like to see how this war will end in Gaza Strip, but also something which is very economical, something that can be done. You know, we're not imagining things here.
We don't have an endless supply.
Of course, and we want to do it in the most economical way. When you go to war, in the right way to go to war is to use what we have in the most smart and wisest way. So we are talking about sending the rest of those Palestinian, the Gazans, from the north part of the strip down to the south. And the border between the north part and the south part is this, well, there are different types of way, but today there is a crossroad called Netzarim Road. And
that's the separating boundary between the blue
and the... thing that separates between the blue and the red and gray. And also there is a valley there, a valley of Gaza, which is also somewhere there, which is also can be like a good natural border between the parts.
And just to be clear, the majority of civilian infrastructure in that area has been demolished.
Right.
So we're talking about tens of billions in reconstruction that there's actually no reason to do.
You don't
because
have
Israelis
anything
don't
there
want enemies
other than tunnels, ruined buildings, a lot of ammunition still buried with the bodies of Hamas people inside the tunnels there. It's not a place to grow up kids.
Okay. And just to add one more very important piece of context, 75% of Gaza residents are refugees, which means they have no claim to the land. They were refugees to begin with. They attest by themselves that they do not belong to the Gaza Strip. They want to be somewhere else.
Right.
So there's absolutely no reason for them to go back to this part of demolished Israel. And there may be a discussion whether or not Israelis want to settle this area at their expense.
So
but
that's the way we... Okay, yeah.
But there's no reason for the international community to bring people back there, not from a legal standpoint, not from a
not a single reason
standpoint.
Except from trying to harm Israel in different ways. But the reason why we colored this thing in blue is that we need to decide what we're going to do with the territory, but we already can announce that this is an ex-territory for the Palestinians. You cannot go back. Why is it so important? And why
this will not be in Palestinian control.
Never. It will not be part of the Gaza Strip forever. By the way, it includes the city of Gaza itself. Why is it so important? Because the Arabs, not like the Westerns and the liberal states, etc., understand very well the idea of tzumud. Tzumud is
the importance of land.
Of land itself. And when you take this part, like 50% or even a little bit more than 50% from the ground from them, every Arab child for centuries from now will look at the map and understand that they got defeated because what happened October 7th. They did something horrible, they got punished in a way that they understand. The land was lost. And that's very important. That's the basic idea behind this.
I think it's also important for Israelis to understand that when we go to war, there are spoils for that. Okay? Israelis need to understand that we have a right to the land, and we have a right to life. And if every time we take land, we give it back at the end, it means that we do not accept the basic premise that we have a right to be here, which We do. There's an ancient synagogue from the 1920s that we found in Gaza Strip.
With the beautiful museum of David the King. But it's not only that. For the young audience, I would say that this thing maybe would have seen like an Arab, like a small country or something. But not only, like 2005 was the year that Israel got out from Gaza. We had like more than I think about more than 10 small and big settlements and towns inside the Gaza Strip. There are a lot of Israelis living there, and Israel decided, with American pressure from the outside, to get out. That's what.
That was a war
So
crime.
we were there, living next to them, and then Israel decided for the peace, you know, to get out of it. But now they didn't build anything you can live alongside with.
Yeah,
they built an army
whenever
of
you
terrorists.
take Israelis out of a territory, it doesn't flourish, but rather the other way around. So when we committed a war crime against Jews in this area and removed them forcibly from the area, everything got worse.
That's right.
So, and we need to understand that whenever we take Israel away from some place, the place deteriorates. But that was just the north.
It's 19 years ago in these days.
Yeah.
19 years ago.
I remember.
And look what happened.
Can we see the map again? So we're saying the north.
The Gazans built a lot, create a lot, did amazing things in the last 20 years in Gaza, but nothing which even connected, related to peace. Their whole creation was about building this horrible death machine, a terror machine, in order to destroy the rest of Israel.
That's why they can't have land anymore.
Did.
No, but that's why they can't have land anymore.
That's what they do.
Because if that's what they use it for, they can't have it.
Okay, so that's the blue
part. The north
part.
has been demolished, and it's not going back, and it's going to stay under complete Israeli control under the premise of victory. And then what's happening on the other side?
So we have 3 more colors to go. We have this gray and the stripe part, which are security zones, actually defensive lines, or perimeter as we call it in the IDF. The one with the stripes is Philadelphia line. It's actually very important, as we already talked here in many times, to hold this line of defense against the fact that the Egyptians and some other countries like Qatar, Turkey, and of course Iran are always, for many years, trying to use the tunnels that was digging under the line in order to send efforts, including money and weapons to Hamas, and build and created the Hamas army. So we need to hold that as a way to cut, effective way to cut Gaza from the Sinai desert.
From weapons supplies.
From weapons and from its life in vain, whatever.
Gaza cannot become another terror nest. When we clean it, it stays clean. And the only way to do that is make sure that we stay right there.
We made this thing happen. Anyway, the security zone in the east side, the gray color, is the one that actually the new border line. By the way, the IDF at the moment are creating those 2 safe zones, so it's actually happening. And the orange one is what left of, we call it Little Gaza, even though the city of Gaza is not there. You can call it the Little Strip or whatever. And that is actually something that's open for the idea and for the actually option that Gazans can immigrate if they want. Because at the moment, and I know that you were talking about it a lot, Gazan people who wants to go and live in other places around the world, they just cannot. The only way can do that is illegal through Egypt now at the moment, because the IDF is holding this perimeter again. They cannot. They just stuck there.
It's illegal because you're not allowed to keep people by force in a war zone. People are allowed to leave war zones. The only people in the world that are not allowed to leave a war zone, by the way, are Gazans. And the only reason they're not allowed is because they're being used weapons to annihilate Israel by their Arab brethren.
So if you ask me as an expert for the security stuff, I would say this is what Israel needs in order to maintain the confidence and the security of the people, of the Israeli people in Gaza. But it's more than that. First of all, we're talking about victory. So this thing is very close to what we have already in the field. We need to do some changing, but it's not very far. I'm talking about what's going on in the field. We're already there. We did the efforts. We put of course the blood and all of that sacrificing. So that's it. But now I think
also, hang on, it's important to remember, On the 6th of October, before the massacre, there were constant bombardments. There are children in Israel who don't like the color red because that is what
That's
the
right.
alarm sounds like in Israel.
For
say
years.
Tzeva Adom, say the color red. So we're not going back to living
There's
next
no reason.
to
We finished with that. We
fired
did,
rockets at the people living close to Gaza or at Tel Aviv.
That's maybe the basic
Victory
mistake.
is when whoever stays in Gaza is no longer a threat to themselves or anyone else, especially not Israel.
Everybody speaks about the conspiracies, right? The conceptions, and not the conspiracy, the conception. And the big concept of all is the fact that you are letting terrorists, armed terrorists, staying, be alive hundreds of meters from kindergartens.
Yes.
That's the basic mistake.
Insane.
You cannot explain this to anybody else anymore. You could have said until October 7th, you can say, I was there, I saw what they did. And after you don't go back. You said that, and it's right.
So if you stay
now
in the
just let's speak about the numbers, and then we can see how this thing is effective.
One last thing that I think is very important. If you stay in the Gaza Strip, it's under Israeli education. We are not going to allow UNRWA or Hamas or anyone else to indoctrinate another generation of children to hate. It's not good for them, it's not good for us, and it's time we assumed responsibility because apparently their parents are not. So whoever stays in Gaza and chooses to stay in Gaza, and they're welcome to stay if they choose peace. But if they stay, it's under the conditions that we make sure another generation of terrorists does not grow. The same thing, by the way, happened in Nazi Germany. They underwent re-education and denazification, and that is what is expected.
Yeah.
But
the Americans actually did that very well to the Japanese. You would have said they're so proud, culture, etc. McCarthy did that very good after Second World War, and they become an ally.
So one last thing, if you follow mainstream Israeli media, and I don't know why you would, but then you would hear a lot of people who don't understand what victory looks like. So now we've educated them, but then it begs the question, where are Israelis with this? Because this only works if Israel is committed to it. But as Yair promised, we're now going to explain the numbers. What do Israelis want? Let's see the map one more time, please.
Yeah, because as I said, this thing is a poll actually, and we asked the people how would they describe the victory. So we have 80%, more than 80% supporting the idea of Little Gaza and the idea of enabling the Gazans to immigrate out. We have 79, it's 80% again, for the idea, actually the need to have a permanent military IDF foothold in the line of Philadelphia in order to save our own territory and principles and to defend our lines. And we have about almost 70%, 67% of support in the idea of what we describe about the north part of the Gaza Strip, to hold this as an ex-territory for the Gazans, and later to see what we're going to do with that.
So this plan has overwhelming support in Israeli public.
But you can't hear about it.
Yeah, you can't hear about it because mainstream Israeli media is not
it's
really...
about 5% of the other extreme
5% of the 5% of nutcases.
Yeah, I don't know, whatever.
No, it's Israelis who really want to be Swedish.
Well, everybody wants to be Swedish.
Yeah, everybody wants to live in Sweden, but
as
we have
we said in
weather.
the beginning of the conversation, that's the big difference between peace and rest in peace, and don't forget that, right?
Yeah.
You have to be very realistic about things.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you very much. I
Dr.
appreciate
Yair
it.
Ansbacher,
Thank you, Noga.
National Security Expert. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Noga. You're doing an amazing job here.
And thank you very much for joining us as well. If you like the content, please share and subscribe and come again.